Hi, I'm Pastor Richard Giovannetti of Standing in the Word Ministries, and I'm here today with David Shestokas. He is a great lawyer for us and for the ministry. And I've asked David to come in so we can begin to explain to you, as far as the state of Illinois, on why we're operating in a lawsuit. And the reason for this being because we want to see that churches and businesses all over the state are allowed to open as they need to. David, it's great to have you with us today, sir.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here with you, Pastor G.
Would you explain why we are suing and what we are suing and how we're going about it?
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. You know, there's been a number of, since this different executive orders that have been issued by Governor Pritzker, there's been a variety of things where he's differentiated issues regarding people of faith and other kinds of businesses and things like that. And it's very, very important to clarify the situations regarding the First Amendment, the religious freedom. There's some specific rules in place that when, if the government chooses to interfere with a fundamental freedom, one of the fundamental freedoms, of course, is the expression of religion. The free exercise of religion and government limitations on establishing religion. That's a fundamental freedom. If they are going to do that, they have to have what's called a compelling governmental interest, and they have to do it in the least restrictive means possible. It's pretty clear that when they told the churches to shut down, that was not the least restrictive means possible.
So what we have to do now is that we're trying to push back in a legal fashion. We want to address this edict, which is now, as far as has been declared, far past what its original intent was. And what are we doing here at Standing in the Word Ministries in order to work against that edict so that we can begin to open up without fear of a repercussion?
Well, we have to talk about some legal situations regarding that. Of course, the governor issued these orders, and the orders, and most recently in effect was something called Executive Order 2020-32. And that was the last one that talked about churches and that they couldn't have more than 10 people. Correct. If they were going to have a in-person worship. And that was set. But here's the interesting thing. A lot of people have in fact sued the governor. We'll get into that. But we in fact sued the state's attorney of Grundy County. Correct. And the sheriff of Grundy County. Now, while in fact the governor issued the edicts, the constitutionally separate elected officials that are charged with enforcing such things would be the local sheriff or the local, in a municipality, perhaps the police department. Okay. And then the people that would be in charge with prosecuting those things would in fact be the state's attorney.
Okay, so now I know that like in this county, we have received several questions as to why we are specifically suing them, seeing as they have declared and stated openly that they will not prosecute these issues if they come to their desk. Now, why do we still have a compelling interest to go ahead and sue, and why then so that we can push this thing back? What's taking place?
With all due respect to both the state's attorney and the sheriff, who have indicated publicly what their policy might be, that doesn't change their legal position. Their legal position as constitutionally elected independent authorities indicates that they still have the authority. There's nothing binding from the opinions that they've issued publicly about what their intentions are. So their intentions are one thing. Having an absolute court order or legal circumstance that would prohibit them from enforcing these illegal orders of the governor would put the church in a much more comfortable position. We don't really know how long the governor's going to do this, how long he's going to continue this. And it's not impossible that somewhere down the road there might be a different sheriff. Yeah. There might be a new sheriff in town.
People are saying, and let's just go this one too, because on the basis of this, okay, now the edict then still stands, even though, as far as recently, the governor has said, oh no, churches, if you want to, you can start getting together, and people were all celebrating and saying, hey, see, and why are you still suing if the governor just opened everything up? What is the underlying thing that's still taking place behind the scenes?
There's a couple of issues in that regard. One is the Illinois Department of Public Health issued a guidance for how churches should operate if they choose to violate Order 2020-32.
So this order still is in existence, but all he stated is that if we choose to violate it, these are the things that we need to do.
That's exactly right. He did not do anything that would repeal or change or withdraw 2020-32. Plus, the fact is there's nothing for him to not issue another one, and not to issue a different one. But as it stands, should he choose to enforce it, and as far as the local enforcement authorities go, if it turns out we ever had a different state's attorney or had a different sheriff, they would not be bound by the policy decisions of Sheriff Briley or State's Attorney Heeland.
Okay, so as we're looking at this, even though we've moved down, let's say like phase 3, which still limits to like 9 or less, the existing edict still stands for him to use it at any time that he wants. And no matter what our sheriffs or our state's attorney want to do, they may be compelled to have to operate and obey this very edict because it has not been rescinded or altered or changed in any way.
It has not been, and besides all that, the governor has actually issued threats to local law enforcement who decide not to enforce his edict, saying that if there's certain kinds of federal money and relief funds that are associated with the pandemic, that he's threatened to withhold such funds from jurisdictions that choose not to enforce them. So, but if in fact there was an order, a court order in place prohibiting the sheriff and the state's attorney from enforcing that, would put the governor in a very tenuous legal position.
Now, across the state, people are also suing the governor. Why are we not suing the governor at the same time? What is the reason for doing that?
Well, a couple of reasons. The governor's lawyers have been playing a variety of games. One of which, there's a fellow that a business in Peoria, RC Outfitters, that sued the governor to operate the business, indicating that his order was illegal. And the first thing the governor's lawyers did was say, "Oh, we don't want to be in Peoria. We want this case moved to Sangamon County over in Springfield, where, of course, they have much more sway over the judiciary, if I might say."
Yeah, that's correct.
So they've done that in a couple of instances. They've made an effort to move the case out of the local place where the local judge knows more of what's going on in the local neighborhood.
Okay.
In that situation, in a couple other circumstances, the governor's attorneys have made the effort to take the case out of the local court and bring it into federal court. Representative Bailey's case down in Clay County.
Correct.
Is currently pending before a federal judge when it was filed originally in Clay County. There was another church case up in the Winnebago County, Rockford area, that the governor moved to bring it to federal court. The governor does not want to be in front of the local judge who knows the local needs, the local community, the local understanding of what's going on. The governor is doing everything in his legal authority. So if we do not sue the governor, then the governor doesn't have any right to move this case out of Grundy County.
So it keeps us in your hands, and it keeps it just where the lawsuit is taking place.
It keeps it in the neighborhood with a judge that's familiar with the local conditions, with the situation of standing in the Word, with the conditions in Grundy County. The governor doesn't want to be there. The governor has been, one of his tactics on these issues has been what we call forum shopping, right?
Correct.
He's been trying to find some place where they're going to
Right.
give him a favorable hearing, as opposed to being someplace where his edicts is being affected. And our position is that we do not need the governor to challenge the law, because if in any other circumstance, if you get arrested, or let's say, well, there's been a lot of challenges to President Trump's orders.
Correct.
Right? When somebody wants to challenge President Trump's orders on immigration, they don't need to sue President Trump. They sue the Department of Homeland Security.
Correct.
The Department of Homeland Security are the people that are charged with enforcing the president's orders. This is the same kind of thing. We're suing the people that are charged with enforcing the governor's orders to prohibit them from enforcing the illegal order.
So where we're standing is, even though we have moved to like phase 3, and he's given this, what looks like a concession, but really isn't the churches.
It was a joke.
Right. It was
a
joke.
trick.
Right. It was all smoke and mirrors just to get people to go, yeah, it's all good. While at the same time, he is holding that original edict steady in his hand that he then can use it. So this is why we're doing what we're doing, because at any moment, this thing can be reversed by himself or his team, and that's why we have to stay vigilant. Now, what is the ultimate outcome that you're looking for in this issue?
Certainly to follow the constitutional law that's in place that in fact says that if in fact you're going to have a compelling government interest, and I would suggest that we've got a compelling governmental interest in protecting people from a pandemic. But what you have to do, and what this governor has not done, is to follow the rule that you have to do it in the least compelling way. And certainly in the least compelling way would be to, rather than leave this nine-member edict in place, do it with some of the guidance and have people be able to meet and whatnot. But there's some things that are also just ridiculous beyond the church situation. You got the circumstance where people can all pile in a car and go to the lake, right?
Right.
But only 2 of them can get in the boat. This is not the least restrictive means of interfering with people's right to assemble, because there's more than just the. Obviously, we're in church and we're representing your congregation, but there's more. There's freedom of speech, because when you prohibit people from getting together, you interfere with the exchange of ideas.
Freedom of assembly, freedom of speech. That's right.
Assembly. And of course, when you do those things, you actually interfere with their ability to petition the government for redress of grievances.
Right.
So we need a bigger statement, and we need a bigger statement in a situation where the local authorities who are charged with, and that's why we have local authorities, right? They know what's going on. That's what this country was really put together, so that we weren't run out of Washington, weren't run out of Springfield. We were run with our community that we're a part of.
It's so easy to just want to step back and sit back and say, okay, we're getting this thing, it's getting done. But churches and businesses all over, we need to stay vigilant, because this is our Constitution, which has been really assaulted, and our freedoms and our rights. And just being handed a couple of pieces of candy is not being given the victory. Our freedoms are at stake, and the reason why we are doing this is because we recognize that even though a few things have come down, the original laws, which are unconstitutional, are still in place, and they remain to be used against us at any other time in the future. And that's why we have to push back, even when it begins to look like everything's okay, and let's not muddy the waters. No, we need to step in deep until this thing is pushed back until the very place where it belongs as far as the Constitution. And the governor has to line up with his own state constitution, as well as the United States Constitution. And these are things which have not been done. And men will do whatever they can get away with until good people begin to push back and say, no, this is what the Constitution says. Our freedoms are at stake, and we can't have them to be allowed to be taken, as far as be taken away. Now, on this, I've had some statements and some questions. In the Bible, chapter 13 of Romans talks about honoring the government and honoring the authorities that be. And I've been challenged as pastor, because of Romans 13, you are wrong to be suing the government, or you're wrong to be bringing this lawsuit, because you are no longer operating under Romans 13. Would you tell us the fallacy of that type of statement?
Oh, certainly be happy to. And it goes back to the founding of our country. Of course, the principle of the United States of America was that we were going to be governed by the rule of law and not by the rule of men. And the assumption there, well, let's just talk about what Jefferson had to say, that we went and assumed our place among the nations of the world according to the laws of nature and of nature's God. And the fact is that puts together a presumption that, in fact, if we're going to have the rule of law and not the rule of men, there has to be a law that's higher than man. Correct. That man cannot alter, that we start there. that we start there, and then work back towards instituting laws made by men that correspond to the law of God. This is in the Declaration of Independence.
Right.
Okay. And of course, you're the biblical scholar, but
thank you.
I'm not, but I could certainly go back to Jesus and render unto Caesar what is Caesar, and render unto God what is God's. So you can have that debate, but the fact is that the court process, is in fact part of the governmental process.
Right.
So the ability to challenge the constitutionality and whether or not the government itself is following the law is part and parcel of
It's my right. I have the legal right to challenge constitutionally a law that I think is unconstitutional. That's what the court system is about.
That's what the court system is about, and that is the situation under which we are operating. Because where does the government actually get its power? The government actually gets its power from the sovereign people.
That's right. We the people, we the people.
Are the government. The government doesn't exist independent of us. So the ability to challenge what that does is exercising our own sovereignty as members of the body politic.
You know, it's imperative for us believers to understand that Romans 13 tells us that government is subject to God. And as believers, as Christians, and as citizens of this nation, we have the right to challenge that our lawmakers and our leaders are answering such, especially under the fact that our Constitution declares, the laws of nature and of nature's God, which is above, which therefore that indicates that they are to have a conscience of conviction, even as they declare our laws and our legal. So we have the right, if we think something is stepping outside the realm of what is biblical and principle and the natures of God and of man, the laws of nature and of God, then we as citizens have the right to peaceably petition or bring to court anything that we feel is out of order. That's what protects our rights as citizens in this great experiment, of who we are as a democracy and as of a republic. We have built this nation under the guise of the covering of the Word of God, which therefore, and mankind is to be subject to that. So as pastors and as churches and as leaders and as citizens, we have every right to hold our government, since it is to answer to God, accountable to God. The difference is we do it in a peaceful sense. We do it according to the law. We bring lawsuits to court so that the courts can decide what is and what is not. So we have every right. So we should never step back. We should never be afraid. We carry the greatest torch to hold our society in a place of total freedom. And when it's not being done right, and when we see a law being established which could at any time be used to browbeat the body of Christ, believers, nations, citizens, and pull us away from our Constitution and establish a new norm, which there isn't one. The norm is our Constitution. Then we as citizens, even when we see some things changing and we think it's all for the good, we need to still take a look. Is there anything still existing? For instance, this edict, which is unconstitutional. And if we do not confront this edict and see this edict to be eradicated, then at any point of time, your freedoms can once again be taken away from you. That is why we're standing in agreement that we need to get government, we need to get people, we need to get this thing moving forward so we can see a long-term victory on the matter. Final thoughts, David.
Well, I would suggest that while you indicated that we have the right to do these things, I would suggest more strongly we have a duty to do these things. With rights come responsibilities, and it certainly is every citizen's responsibility to defend our freedoms. And in terms of final thought, I would suggest that we overlook the Declaration of Independence way too often in terms of how we approach things. There's 55 words from the Declaration of Independence. So when I give talks, I like to talk about the fact that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these rights are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and the duty of the government is to, in fact, protect those rights. So the fact is that's what the government is supposed to do, it exists for us to protect our rights, and we need to hold the government accountable in terms of protecting those rights.
David Shestokas, thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this band is doing a great job for us at Standing in the Word Ministries. And as we close this, I want to challenge us as believers. We do not step back. We are here to be the backbone and the foundation and the strength for this nation. We are here to see the kingdom of God advance and to see your freedoms to be held true and strong. Hey, I'm Pastor Richard Giovannetti, Standing in the Word Ministries. Say we love you. God bless you. Have an awesome day.